All right, welcome back to this episode of Think Business Live. Looking forward to talking to serial entrepreneur Brandon Green. He has helped fund, launch, and grow more than 15 successful startup businesses since 2001, totaling more than $6 billion in sales. Those are some nice numbers, Brad.
Wow.
Yeah,
who's this guy?
Right. Never believe your own PR. Right? Right. Those are impressive. That's great. Well, I'm looking forward to talking with you because I think right now, as we sit here on September 18th, Brandon, there's so many people, you're in Washington, D.C., and there's so many people, so many new entrepreneurs, I think, sprouting who are taking control of their life, their destiny, et cetera. So I'd love to start there, right? Like, here's a quick question. Are entrepreneurs born or made?
Wow. I actually think that the true entrepreneur, it's in your DNA, it's in your natural behavioral profile style. However, I think there's a lot of entrepreneurs that can be made, the people that really like to be part of a broader team. But in my mind, like the entrepreneur is out on the edge and likes to get a lot of stuff started and done. And I think that's kind of embedded in one's natural style.
Yeah.
So I'd go a little bit more born, though there's a lot around entrepreneurship that can be made.
Yeah. And I think let's dive into that for a second, because I really want to talk. I want to talk to a bunch of different layers of people who are listening now and in the future. But first, for that one entrepreneur who's an entrepreneur who needs a business partner, right? There's the entrepreneur that doesn't need a business partner. And then there's the entrepreneur that needs a partner to kind of, maybe they're more inward and they need somebody who's outward. I mean, depending on what their career is. And so I think there's the solopreneur,
yes,
the team-oriented entrepreneur.
Right.
So kind of talk about those, if you would.
Yeah. So first of all, I'm very, very positive on partnerships. I have had businesses where I've had no partnerships and businesses where I've had partnerships. And generally speaking, I think business with partnerships, and there's a variety of ways to do that, work really well if you find the right symbiotic relationship around that. So I would say this around entrepreneurism and partnerships in solo versus not, that on one hand, you do have these folks that seem to do better on their own, but let me tell you, there's a ceiling to that. At every growth stage or at larger growth stages of companies, even those super duper solopreneurs, if you will, need to start to wrestle with, how do I have other humans in my life in a deeply meaningful way that allows my business to go forward? And so, I think if you're sitting there thinking about starting a business, even if you're that, like, I want to go it on my own, I would start thinking even now early, what might a partnership look like? I mean, if you look at some of the biggest, best businesses in the world, nobody does that on their own.
Yeah.
There are partnerships along the way that look like a lot of different, structures and mechanisms. But I think that's an important thing to consider early.
Yeah, I do too. I think, well, like you said, like coming up with that early, I think is the key.
Right. And it doesn't mean you have to bring in an equity partner into your business day one. A great partnership could be a great vendor relationship that you have for 5 years, and that really propels the business to another level. Or every employee on your team is a partner if you treat them well and treat them right. So I think we've got to think a lot about how do we get other people involved as early as possible, or you're going to find it to be a very lonely journey.
Yeah. Let's talk about the mentorship when it is, that solopreneur. I'm a big fan that everybody should have 3 mentors.
Yes.
You need mentors, you need coaches, you need, I'm a business coach. I've always had a business coach. I think those things are important. So just talk about the mentorship and just the different layers of mentorship as it's, wisdom, accountability, things of that nature.
Yeah. I have had a business coach from the moment I could afford to hire one.
Yeah.
But even before that, I had accountability partners, colleagues, people that wanted to see me succeed in one way or the other, help me along the way. So I would say from the minute you've got a business idea, the corresponding question is who is going to help you with that.
Right.
And if you can't afford to pay a business coach, I will tell you there's a lot of successful entrepreneurs that love to mentor young new entrepreneurs for no cost at all.
Yeah.
So though, I and this as a business coach, you only have the perspective you have. And in order to actually grow anything of substance, you've got to bring in other people's perspectives. And a great coach or a mentor or accountability partner will do that. But in terms of like what are the different kinds, the way I think about it and the way I organize it in my life is I look at all the key areas of my life and business and I ask myself, who's the one person in that key area that's holding me accountable to my goals and helping me move forward? So, on my operating businesses, who's doing that? On my financial wealth building, who's doing that? This morning, I was at the gym with my personal trainer. That's my coach in my physical realm, right? Yeah. I've got an acupuncturist who sort of coaches me in the physical, but also sits in the spirituality side. So that's how I think about it is there's several key areas in your life, and everybody needs to have somebody in all of those key areas to truly move things forward.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. I think, the mind, body, and spirit are, they need to be in alignment. And whoever you need to kind of help you evolve, I'm a big believer, the same level of consciousness that got you to where you are cannot get you to where you want to be.
Yes.
But, yeah.
Yeah. And one other thing I'll say on that is sometimes people will idolize someone for everything. And I think that's a mistake because if you look at high performance individuals in any sector, sports, business, music, people are generally genius in one key, maybe two key areas. And so by having several models in several key areas of your life, you're I think likely to end up at a much more well-rounded place. I mean, there's some fantastic sports models, for example, that I would not want to be my personal development models in terms of how they're driving success. So I'm just very thoughtful about who I'm picking to be in that circle of people who are going to guide and mentor me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I agree with that. And I think, and I'll comment on that one more time. I think a mentor is somebody who wants the best for you and wants to see you grow. I think, and I've run into this before, you think someone's a mentor, but really they're just, they don't have your best interest in mind. And so you got to really kind of pay attention to the nuances of that to really find the mentors that want to see you soar, grow, even if it means growing past them. So those are important elements.
John, that's a painful reality, right? There have been many relationships in my life that I have outgrown and wrestled with that idea and felt really bad about it, actually. And for years wasn't sure what to even do with that. And that is actually, if you're going to be a growth-oriented individual, you're going to run up against that. You will meet people that are in your life for a time, and then they move on and they're no longer in your life. And unless you figure out how to do something, unless you figure out what to do with that, you'll end up collecting a bunch of people that are holding you back inevitably, and you'll be resentful around that. And I've been in that spot. So that's a really interesting point that you're making.
Yeah, no, I've been there too. Right. You got a time, a season, or a lifetime, I think is the
right.
same,
right. I love that saying. Yeah.
And there's a lot of guilt because when you have the lens that someone is a mentor and then you realize that they're really selfish for their own reasons and kind of held you down a little bit. But live and learn. That's how you live and learn. So,
that's right.
Yeah. Let's talk about sales for a second. You've launched 15 businesses, totaling $6 billion in sales. At the end of the day, there's so many things that can be done, and we're not diving into a lot of those. But you gotta close the sale.
Yeah.
Right? And so when you're looking at $6 billion in sales, there's a lot to reverse engineer of really, powerful and important and effective, efficient things that you've done. So if you had to point to, 1, 2, or 3 key things that led to the ultimate close, what would that be?
The thing that for me has been instrumental in closing a lot of sales has been being very clear on the activity I needed to generate, the volume of activity I needed to generate to make the numbers work. And I think that's something that people often underestimate is the sheer volume of contacts that generally need to be made to get good conversion along the pipeline. So I'll give you an example. When I got into the real estate business as an agent, right? I had come from an information technology staffing company that had trained me on cold calling. And in that business, information technology staffing, the numbers were I needed to make 100 cold calls a day, and I needed to go on 5 client appointments, take 3 people to lunch, and close 2 deals a week. Those were the numbers that they trained me to. And I did that for a couple of years and really liked it. But then I got into real estate. I was like, all right, now I'm in real estate sales, very different than information technology staffing sales. But I thought, well, there's a conversion pipe of some sort here in real estate too. Yeah. And so I set out knocking on doors. And over time, I realized it was about 100 doors that I would need to knock on. And those 100 doors, 10 people would give me an opportunity to talk, more or less. And of those 10, one, maybe two people would actually list a house with me. And I needed to sell at least 30 houses that year to make a living. So I started to reverse engineer the activity and said, oh, well, if I need to sell 30 houses, then, and I need to knock on 100 doors to get one house, how long exactly is it going to take me to knock on 100 doors?
Yeah.
And inevitably, I realized the math said I needed to be knocking on doors like 6 to 10 hours a day. And so I did. Now, I got better at my conversions over time. I mean, over time, more people listed with me by knocking on fewer doors. But I think when it comes to sales, saying this is the outcome I want and reverse engineering the pipeline all the way back to the activity you can control. Yeah. And putting all of your effort on the activity you can control and being a little bit less obsessed with the outcome and obsessed with the amount of activity you need to do to drive the outcome in the end.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. I mean, it's amazing too, because I think a lot of people don't spend enough time on metrics and what they got to do on a daily basis, and then course correcting when they have an off day. And so,
there you go.
Yeah. I mean, when it comes to sales, it's not like a diet. You can't just start over every Monday. Right. You need to say, okay, if this was my goal for the year and this was my goal for the day or for the week, and then course correcting. So I love what you're talking about, understanding the volume, the activity. I want to go back to something that you said earlier when it came to talking about. I'm using my words of unique ability. You were saying kind of that one thing that everybody's good at. How important is it when you're running businesses like you are, when you are growing businesses, to have all the people in the right seats really doing what they're that one unique, exceptional thing that they're great at, and making sure that they have the platform to actually execute on that?
Yeah, so this is a funny one because it depends a little bit, I have found, on the stage the business is in. And a lot of new businesses, the owner needs to do a lot of different things well beyond maybe their best gifted skill set. Yeah. Though relatively quickly, that owner needs to get to the point of revenue where they can hire people out, or you'll just end up getting completely bogged down. I think one of the challenges I've experienced in my career, though, is like any good entrepreneur, my ego says I'm really, really good at a lot of things. Right. And the reality is I am generally good at a lot of things and fairly fair at a bunch and poor at some, but I'm only really, really good at a few. And it took me several years of maturity in my business life and in my life to distinguish between things that I'm actually really, really good at versus the things I'm really a C+ at and was just getting by. Yeah. So I think the sooner we can make that shift of personal awareness and say, hey, these are the core things I'm the best at, and begin to build a team around the other things that you're actually legitimately not great at, it'll help. I'll give you one other point on this that helped me. A mentor of mine, when I was really struggling with this, which usually manifests itself in terms of control and not letting go of things, he said to me, look, Brandon, I know you think you're great at everything. Let me tell you two things. One, you're actually not. And you should just take that on and start to distinguish that for yourself and your business. The sooner you do that, the better. Second is, if you can delegate it to someone else and you get 80% of the results you think you could get, chances are it's worth delegating. Yeah. And that helped me kind of relax a little and say, I can start to build a team now because my expectation that they do it exactly like I do it relaxed, because that's not really real, and allowed me to start to understand what it was like to develop other people.
Yeah, it's great. Let's talk about developing other people for a second. Developing other people, to me, I was on a podcast this morning. Been on a couple of calls with clients, and the theme of today seems to be more training, more development, more, people are working in a remote world today. And so when it comes to training your people and investing in your people, right, you can't get $6 billion in sales without investing in your people. So I'm making some assumptions right now that you invest in the people in your businesses. And so talk about the importance of developing people. And I just want to throw in a couple things. Studies show that millennials will stay at a job about 3-4 years. And so sometimes people say, well, I don't want to invest in someone that may leave in the next 3 to 4 years. I think that's very backwards. But I want your opinion on, just the mindset, the culture, the investment track of growing your people.
Yeah. So when I think of growing and developing people, I do look at the time frame people are going to be with me, and I ask at the very beginning for 12 months. I look for a 12-month commitment. I think 2 to 3 or 4 years is just doesn't really happen much anymore. Though I think 12 months is a reasonable ask. And because there's going to be an investment on my part and an investment on your part. And if we can make something work for 12 months, then I think generally speaking, that's a win.
Yeah.
In terms of what do we make work, I'm looking to ensure that their personal goals outside of whatever the business is trying to do somehow align with what the business's goals are. And we can create a symbiotic relationship between the person's personal goals and the business outcome that needs to be driven in order for them to satisfy that personal goal. And then I highlight that line every time I meet with them. Because where you start to get disconnected, I think, in developing people is when they're ultimately trying to do something else in their life. Mm-hmm. And they've got this job and they're doing the best they can at it, but they don't see any correlation with their broader goals. So I look for that and try to make sure that is highlighted. Yeah. The next thing I'd say about developing people is good old-fashioned staying in touch from a management cadence with your people, i.e., you need to meet with people that you directly manage every couple weeks. If you're not having a one-on-one with people that you're responsible for as a business owner every couple weeks, I can guarantee you that relationship is eroding, and eventually it's probably not going to end the way you hoped it would.
Yeah.
As humans, we're like, we've got so many things on our mind that if you're not in that relationship every couple of weeks, then you're missing the boat. So in some ways, developing people can feel a bit like a nebulous idea. Like, what does that mean? There is some of that, but it's sometimes just good old-fashioned management of staying in touch with people and aligning their goals with the business goals every other week in a one-on-one cadence where you care.
Yeah.
And a lot of the rest of it works itself out.
Yeah. I see so many people, who they spend so much time building the relationship capital with prospects, with clients, but they forget about their internal people.
Yeah.
That's so important. And, I love what you said when it came to, it's not going to end the way you want it. If you really, I see this in companies, and I'm sure you do too. If somebody leaves and you're surprised, then you did something wrong.
Then it's your fault.
It's your fault. Right.
It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're responsible. As the business owner, you're responsible. And believe me, I've had a lot of people leave and I've been surprised. And every single time I look back on that, in hindsight, I'm like, oh, I slipped up on my one-on-one cadence.
Yeah.
I knew we were disconnecting, but I never called it out. I let the elephant sit in the room and nobody talked about it. Whatever. And I think that's really part of developing people is staying in touch with that and being willing to call it out. And the cadence of that is every other week. It's almost too simple, but it works. Like every other week, meet with your people, talk about their goals, talk about the business goals, see how people are doing and see how you can help them.
Yeah. I almost think it's right now, it's almost once a week. And sometimes for leadership teams, 5 to 10, maybe max 15 minutes a day meetings. Because you're right. It's so simple. It's complicated. And I think what gets in the way, at least what I see get in the people's way, is just consistency. It's really hard to be consistent. So when you're so talk about your discipline and resilience as a business owner on how you maintain consistency, and also how you infuse the inspiration, influence, whatever you want to call it, for others to stay consistent.
Yeah. Well, so I realize that I can only be consistent on a couple places. I cannot be consistent on everything. And so in every business that I own and operate or invest in, I ask myself, what is the one thing that's my responsibility to hold the consistency line around? And then I plug that into my calendar. And then I have business coaches that hold me accountable to those items that I've pre-identified as I've got to be consistent on this. I'll give you two examples. In some of the businesses that I own, I am the guy that drives the monthly financial meetings. It happens every single month, but I don't drive the day-to-day interaction. So I consistently make sure that monthly financial meeting is booked. In other companies, I'm the guy that drives the daily huddle to make sure that on a consistent daily basis, the executive team is touching base and we're having a quick sync up for 10 to 15 minutes. That's my job. Everything else can be everything else, but that happens every single morning. So I think as humans, like we have limited capacity in what we can manage consistently, and we have to choose very, very carefully what those things are to make sure that they've got the highest leverage point in the business. Yeah.
Yeah, that's well said. I like what you said when you talk about, where do you kind of hold the consistency line? Because especially if you're a manager, your energy, your culture, everything that you do is the culture that everybody behind you follows.
Exactly. And this can all come all the way down to the marketing and communications team. Their one thing might be to make sure that the communication that the company is putting out is consistent and it's happening consistently.
Yeah.
That's their thing. I can't be paying attention to that if I'm also running the daily huddles and managing the financial team and et cetera, et cetera. So that's back to, you can't do it all alone. At some point you have to build out a team. And everybody needs to know, like, what am I responsible for here? What can the team count on me for? And make sure that gets driven.
Yeah, well said. Let's talk about, I want to talk to the entrepreneur who just graduated college for a minute.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them. The world looks a lot different than they thought, last February, even beginning of March. So talk to the young, hungry entrepreneur who's graduating college, and we look at the next decade where there is already so much opportunity. The studies show that by the year 2030, pre-COVID, that 85% of the jobs that exist in 2030 don't exist today. Colleges have been teaching and continue to try to teach adaptability. So they don't know necessarily completely how to teach to a job market of jobs they don't know what they'll exactly be. So talk to that entrepreneur who's graduating. And what the first steps are.
Well, so I would say two things to that entrepreneur, and then I'll give you the next step. First, you've got a lot more time than you realize. I mean, if you're just graduating based on life expectancy rates, you're probably going to be working till you're 80 if you love what you do. So you have like 60 years. So just like chill out. It may seem like you've got to get a lot done this year, and you may be feeling a little depressed about the environment or not, but you got a lot of time. Second, I was talking to one of these entrepreneurs actually just last week who's opened a media company and really failed in one of the client interactions that I had introduced him to. And he was feeling really, really bad about it and questioning whether or not that type of media company is what he wanted to do in the next 10 years. And I said, look, chances are very good that what you're doing today is not at all going to look like the business you're going to own in 3 or 4 or 5, let alone 10 years. And that's part of the joy of it. So therefore, the next step for these entrepreneurs is I want you to start something and start selling. Like, what can you sell and actually find a sweet spot where the economy is going to pay you money for a product or service, and start to learn from that. There's no better, I think, trainer on the ground in business than trying to sell something and getting the market to say, oh, I'm not going to buy that, or I am going to buy that. I'm not going to buy it at this price, but I'm going to buy it at this price, and start to sort out how all that comes together. No business works without revenue. So you've got to figure out how you're going to start to make revenue.
Yeah.
I know there's some like asterisks around tech companies where they can be pre-revenue and so forth. I get that. But at the end of the day, the game is still the same. We're just segmenting the sale down the road a little bit. You still have to figure out how you're going to generate revenue, and mapping that out is an important thing to do. And then just start taking action.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. All right, Brandon, you ready for a quick speed round?
Sure.
All right. Favorite book and why?
The Ray Dalio,
Principles.
The Principles. It's right here behind me. It's just such a comprehensive view on how to set up a life and a business. Love it.
Yeah. If you have 3 years to read it, I mean, it is not an easy read.
It is not. It's more like a manual than it is a book.
Like a manual, yeah. I actually have the book. I'm listening to. I listen to the book as well, and they also actually made like a kid's version of the book. I don't know.
That's cool.
All that, yeah, where it just kind of talks about it in a very quick and concise way. But that's a great one.
Love it.
Best piece of wisdom you've ever received?
Best piece of wisdom I've ever received. And I received some self-care wisdom from my acupuncturist when I was having some real serious physical issues with my stomach nobody could figure out. She said, you've got to figure out a way to introduce self-care into your ambition, because if you don't do that now, you'll end up ruining your body by the time you're in your 30s. And she was right. And I think that has saved me a lot, and it's something that I take on now. Self-care.
It's great. Nothing like a little apple cider vinegar to help the stomach. Yeah. And finish this sentence, Brandon. The one thing people need to do in 2020 to finish the year strong is
forget about the pandemic. In terms of the business, forget about pandemic and just work your business pipeline, work your sales. Don't let the pandemic sit in your mindset. A lot of people are succeeding right now.
Yeah. Well said. Tell everybody who your ideal clients are in whatever capacity that is for your businesses, where they can get a hold of you, and all that other good stuff.
Yeah, so go to brandongreen.com. That's the best place to see where I am right now. I'm developing out a portfolio of businesses, doing all kinds of interesting things. We have a brand new website coming up here in about a month, so you'll see that. And then follow me on any of the social media platforms. But I'm having a lot of fun on Instagram these days, Brandon A. Green.
All right, cool. Brandon, this was great. This was like a mini master's class. I loved it.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for taking time to share your knowledge. You know, you got so much of it, so many businesses. You know, the lenses and perspective that you shared everything today is great. And because you've lived it, you've worked it, you've executed. You know, make mistakes, you pick up where you got to grow. So you know, it kind of came across in everything that you said today. So I appreciate everything that you shared. And if anybody needs to get a hold of Brandon, reach him at brandongreen.com. Brandon, thanks, man. I appreciate you taking time, and thanks to everybody who's listening. And everybody, stay safe and have a good day.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Brandon. Appreciate it.
You bet.